What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist here with
Gersh1.
and we're back at it, answering more questions in another episode of For the Greater.
This is a video series where we answer the questions left by you, the viewer. If you have a question for us, comment down below. Put question in front of your question because we get to those questions first. That is what Angel Warrior 28 has done. Also, if you want to support the channel, you can with super thanks. If you do, you'll get a guaranteed answer in the next episode, which is why this question is, what would be the worst role / title to have as a loyalist Space Marine?
There are a ton of roles when you think about Space Marines. It's not just that they're warriors. You have different rankings, and you have really important, like, what's the word? I guess not sub-factions. Like, I'm trying to say, like, apothecary, chaplain.
Yeah, like hierarchies.
Yeah, hierarchies. Tac Marines. Like, these roles play an insurmountable amount of, like, behind the scenes and on the tabletop type of role for these Marines.
And Space Marine 2 did a really good job of showcasing those roles, specifically with the apothecary, I felt. Did we see, like the left lieutenant, which is what Titus is, but then also the captain.
Yeah, we see a dynamic shift because you have Titus, who used to be a captain, be demoted to a lieutenant, and now he's taking orders from this captain, which clearly you see he's got his own agenda, his own ideas of how to do things. And then you also have another type of schism between the sergeant of the squad that used to be leading the squad, and now Titus has usurped him in control, and he's leading his squad. So there's a lot of little, like, power struggles that we see there.
So the big thing is there that if you ever want to feel like shitty as a Space Marine because you're on a certain role, have somebody who like basically outranks you show up and say, hey, I'm going to take care of your group, or I'm going to take care of your mission. And I feel like that's like a kind of a backhanded slap. Because even Marnius Calgar apologized, right, to Titus for being like, I'm sorry they doubted you kind of thing.
Yeah, the whole, like, in between Space Marine 1 and Space Marine 2, where Titus was, like, held captive and interrogated and, like, tortured. Yeah. That's basically him saying, hey, dude, I know you got tortured. I should have done more, but I'm glad you're back.
Yeah. Which, that whole portion of his life, it brings us to another role that is pretty bad as a Space Marine, and that is the Death Watch. So if you get sent to the Death Watch, think of it as being sent to the Watch in Game of Thrones, or being sent to, I don't know, prison with the chain gang kind of thing. Yeah. Where like now you're still serving the Imperium, but you're doing work by yourself and as like kind of punishment. A lot of solo missions, a lot of like you're under the command of something that's not even autonomous to itself. You're under the command of the Inquisition.
Yeah, so it's pretty much the dirty work that the Inquisition won't do or doesn't want to do, you have to do it.
Yeah, and you got to think about it this way too. Most Space Marines look at humanity kind of like, like we're better warriors than this. Why are we supporting them? So now you have to take command, or you need to take instructions from the Inquisition, which are all just humans. Like basically, humans that are suspicious about everything.
Right. So now you're like an extension of them, which is more of a slap to a bunch of Space Marines. But not all of them are like that. We don't really see that in Space Marine 2, really. Like, you see that the humans, Acadians in this instance, really respect the Space Marines and kind of listen to them whenever they're around. You don't really see Titus going like, oh, stupid human, stuff like that. So
yeah, and it's usually only for like the chapter. Well, I think most Space Marine chapters feel that way. I think there's a small minority of Space Marine chapters that are like okay with humanity. So we see salamanders, we see ultramarines, but throw in a Black Templar into the Death Watch and how he's gonna feel. He's gonna be pissed.
Yep.
So yeah.
And it's not like the whole chapter is like that way. You do have some outliers. Like there could be ultramarines that hate humans, there could be salamanders that hate humans, but for the most part that's kind of how they operate.
Exactly, yeah. Next question.
This one is by Jake Hinton. He goes on to say that one thing to add about the warp and chaos is that one can completely exist without the other, but not the other way around. For example, chaos cannot exist if the warp doesn't, but the warp will be just fine without chaos. chaos can't exist unaided outside of the immaterium either. The warp is like a mirror of the darkest parts of reality, because reality itself is dark in this universe. You get out of it what you put into it.
Yes, kind of. Because I don't think that humanity or any race could have influenced the warp in a positive way. When there's like a certain amount of just beings.
Yeah, because anytime there's sentient life in the galaxy, that life will have beliefs, and these beliefs will coalesce in the warp to create X, Y, and Z. Most notably, humans are the ones that created the Chaos Gods.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to think, because, I mean, there was sentient life way before humanity, and you don't hear, like, oh, Korn, Nurgle, Zeech was created by, you know, the Slaaneshi, or not the Slaaneshi, the Eldari people.
Yeah.
The Eldari specifically made Slaanesh, but again, with the way the warp works, it's like these gods always were, but also never were. Like birthed.
It's hard because space-time has time. But something that you made me think about right now, and that we've talked about in previous episodes, is that when you look at the War in Heaven, which was the first big catastrophic like conflict between two major powers, the Old Ones and the Necrontyr, they were manifesting negative emotions into the warp. But I think those emotions are like impossible not to have as any sentient being. Mm-hmm. So even if the War in Heaven never happened, the warp itself would have still been dangerous.
Yeah, because you always have like descendants of the warp that aren't chaos related.
Yeah.
And like the Psych-Nuan, like those were a huge threat to all sentient life.
Yeah.
They're not chaotic in any way.
No.
So I think regardless of what chaos needs, like there's always going to be a form of quote unquote chaos in the material and the warp.
Yeah. And the way that you explained it, it did kind of make me think of Stranger Things. And one thing that I didn't like about Stranger Things is that like the Upside Down is basically just like, it's the same city, but just in a dark kind of twisted way. And I feel that that's not the warp. Like the warp is not a mirror of, let's say, this house or whatever.
There's not a Terra in the warp.
Yeah, exactly. There's probably just like some type of coalescing power there, just like with the Golden Age of the Eldar. There wasn't like an equivalent to the Crone Worlds in the warp. All it was just the basically Slaanesh forming, birthing, creating the Eye of Terror, but it was, you know, yeah.
Yeah, just like Chaos Gods can create their own domain.
Yeah.
It's not like they're taking a domain from the material world and making it into the immaterium, which is also cool because that allows them to like swallow up planets and create demon worlds, and then spit them out as like this crazy thing.
Yes, like a man in a fetal position.
Yeah, which is crazy. Like, how do you take a planet and make it into like this big baby thing?
Gross. Next question comes from Jake Hinton. What is the proper saddle choice for a Velociraptor? And are spurs recommended for leisure riding?
Velociraptors have really tough skin, so I think you'll need the spurs to let the raptor know, you know, go faster, stop, left, right. But at the same time, they don't exist.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter.
They don't have skin.
You don't even need a saddle because remember, most Velociraptors were too small to ride, and they were feathered.
Mm-hmm. They were essentially chickens.
Yeah. So what do you put underneath a pillow to make it softer? Feathers. So
yeah, there you go. You don't need a saddle.
Next question.
This one is by Daniel Daughtry. Why is it that we call it taking a dump instead of leaving a dump? It's not like we're taking it anywhere.
That's a good question, and I'm trying to like think because even back in the day, like medieval times, you would take yourself to go somewhere else to take a dump. Mm-hmm. So you're not leaving the dump in your home or anything.
Yeah,
like
the
that.
dump is inside you, and you're taking it to the bathroom.
Yeah. So there's your answer.
Yeah, it depends on perspective.
Exactly.
Because leaving a dump could be like, I'm leaving this dump from the restroom, and it's coming with me.
Yeah.
But it could also mean the same thing. Like, I'm going to take this and leave it here.
Yeah.
Perspective.
I feel like now I understood the warp question more than this question. Next question. I got one from the big one. My homie little Ricky is still recovering from the drive-by, and he got a buttload of medical bills. So would you guys do me a solid and do a skydive for charity to raise funds for my homies? So the cool thing about medical debt in the U.S. is that it's really, really bad, but you could ignore it. Like, all that's going to happen is that creditors are going to call you. You don't report it to the credit bureau anymore, so if you want a loan later in the future, it's not really going to affect you. It's just a pesky, like, everyday calling you kind of shit. Mm-hmm. So no, we're not going to skydive for your home.
Yeah, I hate the thought of skydiving. Like, why would I choose to fall from a height no human should be at?
Exactly. What are we, velociraptors being ridden? No.
Yeah.
And those were the questions for today. If you guys have more questions for us, please comment down below. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us, and we'll talk tomorrow.
That's right. As always, it's been the Sound Alchemist here with
Gershwan.
and we are out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.